What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Total Takedown for UFC 282. Rocking my brand new Coyotes Reverse Retro Baby, a birthday gift from the family. Guys, I've got the best in-laws on the damn planet. They've always supported my degenerate gambling and my love for the hockey, so shout out to them. I'm looking clean for your show today, thanks to the fam. So we're going to talk about totals today. We broke down on Monday the entire card, top to bottom. If you want to check out the reads on all the fights and stuff like that, we had Connor Burks from the Helwani show jump on and talk through us with that. So that was a great show. It was fun, entertaining. Check that out. This is Pub Sports Radio. These lines are brought to you by Superbook Sports. Let's jump straight on into this bad boy. The first fight of the night, we've got Steven Kozlow and Cameron Saaiman, both guys making their UFC debuts. We've got a total set at 1.5. The 1.5, interestingly enough, is minus 115 to the over and minus 105 to the under. So ever so slightly juiced to the over 1.5. Steven Kozlow is a guy who has never been out of the round one. All 6 of his wins, round one submission. So it's interesting that they've got the fight juiced to the over. I think that supports the fact that Cameron Saaiman is the favorite here. And he's more of a kickboxer. He's a technical guy, likes to strike from the outside. So if he's in the driver's seat, they're expecting him to be able to at least hold his own on the ground or defend those takedowns and then extend the fight. I kind of like to say under. I kind of like to say violence. I think that we don't know enough about either of these guys, and there's a chance that Kozlow is just the goods. He comes in, steamrolls Saaiman, and if Saaiman is in the driver's seat on the feet, I don't know anything about Kozlow's striking. I don't know if he's any good at all. I don't know if his defense is good. The only tape we have on him is with him being on the ground. So I have no clue what kind of a defensive striker he is. I'll say violence. I'm going to say under 1.5 for the first fight of the night, but be careful. There's a couple of these fights, just like betting the money lines this week, that frankly I don't want to have any part of on the totals because I have too many questions and I don't know what to make of it. Next up, we've got Vinicius Salvador taking on Daniel Da Silva. Under 1.5 is minus 205, and this line is actually down on Superbook Sports. You're going to have to go elsewhere if you want some of that violence for this bad boy because they know. I think they've closed this one down because they probably don't want to take any abuse on it. Daniel Da Silva is a killer be killed fighter. Like, he comes out here and has 4 minutes of gas. He either gets a knockout, a sub, or he goes out on his shield. His opponent, Vinicius Salvador, he's been finished a couple times as well. 2 knockouts, 1 submission loss. Super tall, super rangy. Likes to throw these big, wild winging power hooks from range. This fight shouldn't take long at all. It's an easy under 1.5 at minus 205 here for me. Eric Silva taking on TJ Brown. Over 1.5 is minus 170. The under 1.5 plus 150. Eric Silva, another Dana White Contender Series guy. Crazy line movement here on this one, taking TJ Brown from a plus 200-ish opening underdog all the way down to plus 100 right now as the underdog. Eric Silva ever so slightly still your favorite in this spot. Silva making his UFC debut coming off the Contender Series at 35 years old. Late to the game here, which is always intriguing when they do that. I think this is going to be a grappling heavy game. TJ Brown has been working out with Bryce Thug Nasty Mitchell. If anybody can work on this man's positional, pace, grappling, all that kind of stuff, it's going to be someone like Thug Nasty who knows his way around a wrestling mat. So kind of believe that TJ Brown is going to have a little bit more success here in this spot. And this would be the Dana White Contender Series fade angle, folks, that if it gets to the point, well, now as I say that, it has, right? TJ Brown is a plus 100 underdog. This is supposed to be an auto fade on the Dana White Contender Series fighter who's coming in a little bit overhyped. And I think TJ Brown probably extends Eric Silva past that first round. That's not something that's happened to him very often. So I would say over 1.5 at minus 170. The problem is we've seen TJ Brown finished both by knockout and by submission before. So there is a big chance that he can get finished, and if he gets finished, it could happen early the way that we have seen this guy grapple. So another one where, again, I'm just not that confident. Alexander Hernandez taking on Billy Q. We've got a total set at 2.5 for this one. The over 2.5 is minus 135. The under 2.5 is plus 115. I talked about this one on Monday. It felt a little bit trappy to me that we were getting a chalky over 2.5. But I do think that's probably because of Billy Q's last couple of fights. He's a bit of a decisionator. Every once in a while, he'll take care of somebody deep in the fight in that third round. So the 2.5 makes some sense. Alexander Hernandez is almost the pure opposite in this spot. He comes out, he looks for a finish early. If he can't get that, he goes out on his shield. This is a break-in competition. He's getting a step down here against Billy Q. He's also dropping a weight class, which both helps and hurts the under here in this spot, because either Alexander Hernandez comes, well, you know what, it might just help the under here, because either Alex Hernandez is going to be a physical beast at 145, carry that weight really well, come down, have a power advantage, or he's going to have even more of a suspect gas tank, because cutting all that weight is going to leave him vulnerable at the new weight class. So I like violence. I like the under 2.5 at plus 115. Chris Curtis taking on Joaquin Buckley here in this next fight. Total set at 1.5. The over 1.5 is minus 155. The under 1.5 plus 135. And believe it or not, guys, I like the over in this spot. I mean, I know both guys are really making a big deal about coming out and swinging. You know, Chris Curtis wants to go to Valhalla. Joaquin Buckley's talking about how he's going to knock him out. Like, you know, we think this is going to be an absolute barn burner. But you look back at some of Chris Curtis's other fights, and he takes his time to get there. You know, the decision to Jack Hermanson, the decision to Rodolfo Vieira, even the knockout against Brendan Allen, that came at the 2-minute mark. We almost got over that 1.5 in that fight. Joaquin Buckley knows what he's dealing with here in this spot. He knows he has to respect his opponent in this spot. And even in his barn burner against Albert Duraev, where he closed up that man's eye and beat him to within an inch of his life, that made it to the second round. They had to stop the fight after that. It got over that 1.5 round mark. He went 15 with Abdulrazak Al-Hassan and Nasruddin Imavov. I think the narrative is kind of driving this one down a little bit, and I think this is where we kind of dip back the other direction. Even though these guys have that firepower, I think they respect each other, and we get a little bit more of a technical battle. I'm going to say over 1.5 at minus 155. Dalcha Lungiambula taking on Edmen Shahbazyan. 1.5 here for this bad boy. Over 1.5 is minus 130. Under 1.5 is plus 110. And I'm struggling with this total, folks. So I'm all in on Edmen this week, right? Like, give me my entire stack. I'm all in. Put my tournament life at risk here if we're playing some poker. I like Edmen Shahbazyan in this spot. It just comes down to the game plan. If he's going to come out and grapple like I think he is, there is a chance that this fight gets extended. There is a chance that he shows off some of those new skills and some of those new chops. However, if Dalcha comes out and really tries to, like, I don't know, push the pace on him, or tries to counter the grappling and swing some big bombs at him, there's going to be opportunities for Edmen to land pretty much at will in this spot. He's the much cleaner striker. He's got faster hands. I expect Edmen to finish this fight. It's just a matter of when. And when Edmen did get onto the scene, I mean, he went to a split with Darren Stewart way back in the day, but it was all first round knockouts. I mean, 2 minutes in, 1 minute in, 30 seconds in, like, I kind of think he gets it done the way he did at the beginning of his career in the UFC. I'll say violence again. I'm going to go under 1.5 at plus 110. I think we get Edmen Shahbazyan 2.0, and I think it's too much for Dalcha to handle. Next up, we got Jay Perrin taking on Raul Rosas Jr. A 2.5 for this one. Over 2.5 is minus 130. Under 2.5 is plus 110. And I've been bouncing back and forth on this one. I cannot make up my mind what I want to do here in this spot, because Raul Rosas is the hype, right? Like, everybody's expecting this kid to just roll through Jay Perrin. Perrin thinks he is more than enough experience to counter that. You know, he's got that man strength advantage. He's been in there 15 minutes before. He's very durable, a decent wrestler himself. And we've seen Raul Rosas Jr. not really manage his gas tank all that well. Let's face it, he's an 18-year-old kid that's only 6-0, so he is prone to make some mistakes. I can see this fight getting extended, but the question is, if it gets extended and Raul Rosas Jr. isn't like on the back of Perrin or something, then what does it look like? Jay Perrin may be able to TKO this kid, may be able to get on top of him and really put him in a position he's never been before. And on the flip side of that, Rosas might just be the truth, and he might be able to take his opponent down and choke him out here. He might be able to do what nobody's been able to do before to Perrin and tie him up like a pretzel. So I kind of like the under here at plus money again, but again, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Rosas Jr. has to kind of hang on for dear life and grind this thing out as a decision instead of getting it done inside the distance. We've got Chris Daukaus taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I think for whatever reason this one came off the board, so I missed it a minute ago. I'm going to bounce back to it to make sure I talk about it. Total set at 1.5. The over 1.5 is plus 130. The under 1.5 is minus 150. And I think we're going to see violence in this spot. Chris Daukaus has really shown us only one thing, and that's that he comes forward and puts that hand speed to good use. Jairzinho Rozenstruik is the opposite. He's a counter striker. He likes to stand his ground, wait for his opponent to get into range, and then he unloads with some big power shots as soon as he's able to. So I think one of these guys is going to sleep, And I do think it's going to happen early. Jairzinho, usually when he comes off of a loss, he's a bit more aggressive, he's a bit more motivated, and we've seen that in his last couple fights. I mean, even in the fight against Alexander Volkov, he was willing to go to war there in the first round of that fight. Volkov did push the pace, but he was more than willing to engage in that fight. Same thing with the Augusto Sakai fight. I know that knockout came at the very last minute there of round one, but he was a decent bit more aggressive in that fight. It's something I do think he's working on. So one way or the other, I think this fight is over pretty early in this spot. I wouldn't be going for that heavyweight over 1.5 myself. Ilia Topuria taking on Bryce Thug Nasty Mitchell. Totals 2.5 here. Over 2.5 minus 140. Under 2.5 plus 120. And another spot where my initial knee-jerk action is to say violence with the way these guys fight, but I think we've got two high-level contenders, two undefeated guys, two guys that know how to dig deep and get the win, and there's a lot riding on the line for this one. One of them's going to, drop down to needing another 5 fights before they get anywhere near a belt. The other one's jumping into the contender circle 1 or 2 away from a title shot. You got to win this one. And if that's the mindset for these guys, I do think we're going to see an over. I think we're going to get a 15-minute battle between these guys. Whether it's Bryce Mitchell trying to play on the outside and avoid the power of Ilia Topuria, kind of pulling a Brian T. City Ortega on us and showing off some really improved striking, things like that, then, we can see this thing go over that way if he's having a risk-adverse striking style. Or if Bryce is able to get the grappling going and these guys have some ground scrambles, I think the submission defense is going to hold up for both guys. I can see this thing grinding its way for a 15-minute fight and really just being left with, were the power strikes of Ilia Topuria more effective, or was the control time of Bryce Mitchell going to be more effective, and no one really knowing who won the fight at the end of the day. I'll say over 2.5 minus 140. Dricus du Plessis taking on Darren Till. Total set at 2.5 for this one. The over is plus 135. The under 2.5 is minus 155. And I like violence here. It looks like there's been some money coming in on this under. I did look at this a little bit earlier in the week, and I think it was minus 150 to the under. I'm going to need to go back and check that, because if I'm right and it was minus 140, minus 150, and now we're sitting at minus 155, I may need to jump in on this sooner than I expected to, because I do like this under. The way Darren Till fights, he's been a big-time counter striker. He likes to fade away. He's got good defense. And then when his opponents extend and they, overreach that chin just a little bit, he's got that big counter left and he just bombs on people. Those are the times that he gets the knockouts, is when he puts that left hand to use. Now, his opponent, Dricus, he comes forward, leaves himself exposed, chin up in the air, and blitzes people. He takes your best shot to give a shot, and you just can't take the shot that he delivers. We've seen Darren Till knocked out several times also, so this is a spot where I think one way or the other, somebody's getting cracked. I do like the under 2.5. And even laying a little bit of a chalk price tag, I think we see a finish, and it's probably a first or a second round, as long as Dricus fights the way we've seen him fight in the past. The next fight that we want to talk about is going to be Santiago Ponzinibbio and Alex Morono. This is a short notice replacement spot. Morono stepping up to fill in here against Ponzi. Total again at 2.5. The over minus 160. The under at plus 140. And this is one where I'm going to go ahead and side with that over. I do think that Santiago, going to decision his last couple fights, being the aged veteran that he is, he's kind of being a little more technical, not putting himself at risk as much. And Alex Morono is a decisionator, right? Like, win, lose, draw, he almost never finishes his opponent, and he does have a super chin on him. He's very difficult to put away. The only guy to really crack him recently was Chaos Williams, and nobody had any idea who Chaos was back in the day. So he's had a couple of round 1 KO losses, but those are, again, against unsuspecting opponents, people that caught him early unexpectedly. I don't know that that's going to be the case here. I think Santiago wins this fight, but I do think Morono's in it, and I do think it gets extended. So if it's going to be a finish, I would expect that Santiago probably is the one that puts Morono down. I would be looking at the decision over 2.5 minus 160. Jared Gordon taking on Paddy the Baddie. Total set at 2.5 here. Over 2.5 is plus 125. Under 2.5, minus 145. And this is a spot where I like violence. Jared Gordon is not a finisher, and so that kind of breaks one of my rules. When I do these unders, I need both fighters to contribute to that under, and Jared Gordon is not a guy that we generally see finishing. But Paddy does have a bit of a suspect resume so far in the UFC, and that's really the spot that I'm kind of questioning here, because he's gotten cracked by some lower level competition, and somebody like Jared Gordon, maybe he can take advantage of a situation situation like that, if Paddy really just is fake news, like nobody, a lot of people are talking him up to be in this spot. But if Paddy is legit, which I think he is, then he finishes Jared Gordon, because Jared Gordon either wins a decision or loses by finish. That's this guy's entire career. So I think Paddy Pimblett is going to find a way to a finish, whether it's that round 1 knockout that he's calling for, whether it turns into a scramble and it takes him till the end of the second round to find a position, get the back, and choke Jared Gordon out. I think Paddy finds a way to get it done. And if he can't get it done and he's just getting mauled by Jared Gordon, I do think he's going to go for broke, and that'll maybe leave Jared Gordon with an opportunity to get a finish himself. So under 2.5 is the way I'd be looking. Magomed Ankalaev taking on Jan Błachowicz in the main event. Total set at 3.5, a rare total of 3.5. We almost never get these. They're splitting that 2.5 and 4.5 because this is a 5-round title fight now, and it's a pick'em. I kind of lean to the over just a little bit. Like, Jan Błachowicz is a guy who we know can go a hard 15 minutes. He's coming off of, that rough fight against Glover Teixeira where he was sick and he had the neck injury, and that's the real reason that one went under. But besides that, he's been able to handle guys, go to decision with guys like, Jacare and Israel Adesanya, and if it wasn't for the Rakic injury, that one was headed towards the over as well, even with the firepower that they were throwing. I love Jan, and I'm a big advocate for the Polish power. I do think he's got more power, but it's a little overblown. The guys he knocked out have been relatively chinny. I don't think Magomed Ankalaev is as chinny as maybe I've made him sound out to be a little bit in the past. I do think he can be had. I do think he can be hit and hurt, but I don't think it's going to be like an early one-hitter quitter. I think Jan will have to land that blow a couple of different times before he's able to find the knockout. So I think these guys are going to respect each other's skill sets. I think Ankalaev, if he knows what he's doing, is going to mix in the grappling, and we've seen Jan give away full rounds at a time when he gets put on his back. I also think if Magomed is able to control the range and he is in the driver's seat as the minus 300 favorite, you can expect him to be playing on the outside using the kicks, and because of that, that'll probably slow the pace of the fight down. I think over 3.5 makes a little bit of sense. I was kind of hot on the under 3.5 earlier in the week, and the more I've kind of sat and marinated on it, I'm like, maybe I'm being a little bit over ambitious there, because Jan really wants his belt back. I don't think he's going to run in and go for broke in that first round like a desperate fighter. He's going to come in there like a champion. He's going to come in there like a man who's owned that belt before, and he's going to believe that he can take out this young gun over the course of a 25-minute fight. I don't think he's going to rush anything, and I think I maybe was mistaken in thinking that at the beginning of the week. So I've kind of changed from violence to the over. I don't know that it's going to go the full 25 minutes, though. These are light heavyweights. These are big 205ers that swing with a lot of power. One of them is an aged 205er, so I do think there's a chance that this thing finishes inside the distance, but if it's the 3.5 we're talking about, I will say over 3.5 at minus 110. That is the total takedown, folks. As always, you'll be getting me tomorrow for the Undefeated Post Weigh-In Show. I will have the Sharp Action Report. Will be joined by Andrew from Superbook Sports to go over what the sharpest bettors that they have to offer have come in and put their cash on for this weekend, so don't miss those. Hit the like button on your way out, subscribe here if you haven't already, and we will see you tomorrow. Let's roll.